It's been a while since we've seen a new archetype create as much panic as Flundereeze did when it was first revealed. Everywhere you looked, people were posting combos that would supposedly bring the meta to its knees, and talking about how these small birds would be the new best deck. But then, out of nowhere, riding on a shining white horse of enlightenment, the meta veterans appeared with a counter that would drive fear into these tiny birds.
Hash Blossom Effect. Response.
Flundereeze is an interesting deck, balancing the harshest of restrictions, not being able to special summon, ever, with some powerful bonuses, like a billion normal summons per turn. Basically, as soon as you normal summon any of their monsters, they start a huge chain of searches and effects that, if they resolve, allow you yet another normal summon. This lets them search and tribute summon a variety of high-level winged beasts, backing them up with back row that could tribute away your opponent's cards, or lock them out of special summons altogether. But like everyone is very quick to point out nowadays, if you negate any part of the summoning chain, your turn usually just comes to an end. The field spell does give you a second chance, and one of their traps does let you try again on your opponent's turn, but other than that, yeah, it's a bit of a problem. So, with the deck's strengths and weaknesses in mind, what cards do you want to be playing with these small birds? I'll be covering them in 3 categories. The good, which you can throw into the deck fairly safely, the bad, which might sound good at first but actually just doesn't work, and the mediocre, which, while they can work, you usually have better options, or they're a side deck option at best. So without any further ado, let's start with a good hand trap that you'll almost always want in this deck. That card is, of course, Dimension Shifter. If you discard this card while your graveyard is empty, then, until the end of next turn, everything sent to the graveyard is banished instead. Now obviously that's a huge problem for some decks, and can even protect you from certain hand traps, but what really makes it shine is how this deck kind of does just want everything to be banished anyway. All of the low level birds banish themselves when they leave the field, they need to add themselves back to the hand when another bird is summoned. The Ostrich can even banish a card from your graveyard, so if you draw Dimension Shifter as a draw spell, you can still make sure to have an empty graveyard. So in short, it cripples a lot of decks while basically benefiting yours. There are 2 little things that stop this card from being an auto-include every time though. The first is that it doesn't work well with the Dogmatica package, which I'll get to later. And the second is that right now, the meta isn't as weak to this card as it could be. The second point will change one day though, and in some upcoming metas this card is bound to be the right choice. So we've seen a card that's good because the birds banish themselves. Now for the opposite. Here's a tech choice that seems great at first glance, if you're forgetting that clause. That card is Earthbound Immortal Rurokocha Raska. It's a winged beast, so it's searchable by the eagle, and it has the usual Earthbound Immortal restriction of needing a field spell active in order to stick around, but this deck wants their field spell anyway, so it does at least have a basic level of synergy. It then has the effect where you target up to 3 cards you control, shuffle them back into the deck, and then discard that many random cards from your opponent's hand. So hand ripping for 3 sounds pretty good for the cost of a few of your low level birds, right? Well, not quite. The problem is, when the birds leave the field, they banish themselves. Because of how Rurokocha Raska is worded, the rest of the effect won't resolve unless they actually get shuffled back, so you end up just losing a bunch of cards for nothing. You could use this effect to shuffle back something like your continuous or field spells, but at that point it's really not worth it. Skip this one. Now for a couple of mediocre tech choices. Remember how good Dimension Shifter is? People like to call it the Macrocosmos on legs, and well, Macrocosmos is the tech choice in question. That trap, along with its spell counterpart, Dimensional Fissure, seems like a perfect fit for the deck for all the reasons I mentioned above, and in isolation, yes they do work quite well, but Dimension Shifter is a hand trap, meaning you can use it to ruin your opponent's first turn, while these cards need to wait until your first turn or even the turn after that before being active. The only thing they have going for them over the hand trap is that they last longer, but usually that won't be impactful enough for it to matter. Plus, these cards are limited to 1 each, ruining any chance of you seeing them consistently. Play them if you can't afford the hand trap, or you just have them lying around and don't want to invest too much into this deck, but otherwise play Dimension Shifter, since it's better in almost all situations. Now let's look at some draw options for the deck. As far as good draw cards go, this deck has a bunch of options with varying price points. On the cheap end, there's Pot of Duality, which lets you excavate 3 cards and choose one to keep with absolutely no downside, since you can't special summon already. It helps you find your field spell or the Robin, and it costs next to nothing, so it's a nice cheap inclusion to add some consistency. Raising the price roughly tenfold, you then have Pot of Extravagance. Since you can't special summon, you won't be using the extra deck, so just banish 6 cards to draw 2 for pretty much free. Finally, in the way too expensive category, there's Pot of Prosperity, which lets you dig twice as deep as Duality, and again, the cost is only extra deck monsters that you couldn't summon anyway. Worth the money? Probably not, but you might as well play it on the online simulators. But of course, not all draw cards are made equally. Time for a bad one. Precious Cards from Beyond sounds good at first. I mean, it's a continuous spell that allows you to draw 2 cards every time you tribute summon a 2 tribute monster, with no once per turn clause. So it seems made for this deck, right? Well, for 2 reasons it's actually not great. Firstly, it has the Pot of Avarice problem of only drawing cards when you've gotten far enough in your combo for it to not really matter. If your opponent let you tribute summon something, you're probably mostly done with your turn anyway, and this deck is great at recycling resources, so it won't really matter. Secondly, Unknown Wind is a great card in a deck, since it allows you to send any of your opponent's card to the graveyard as one of your 2 tributes. It's nice removal, and helps reduce the cost of your tribute summons. However, Precious Cards from Beyond conflicts with that, since it doesn't count as actually tributing for the tribute summons, so you'll have to choose between drawing cards or removal. Overall, it's better to just use Unknown Map and 1 or 2 of the draw cards instead. Now let's look at some decent boss monsters that you can tribute summon thanks to this deck. First of all, there's Mist Valley Apex Avian, which gives your deck a standard Omni Negate by returning itself to the hand, since you can then also use something like your field spell or a trap to start your summoning chain again. You might even be able to summon this card straight back from your hand, giving you another negate that turn. It's simple but effective, and probably one of the ones you should always include. Then there's the one that everyone immediately jumped on when this deck was first announced, and it's not hard to see why. Visor the Mega Monarch says that if you tribute summon this card using a wind monster, you can target 2 cards on the field and 1 in the graveyard, then return the first one from the field to the deck, the one in the graveyard also to the deck, and then the extra one from the field gets returned to the hand. Yeah, this isn't the easiest card to understand at first glance, but once you do, you can see how good it is. Summoning it on your opponent's turn is devastating, returning their cards to the hand and deck to either interrupt their combos, or even to stack their next draw in order to slow them down. Additional uses include sending itself back to the hand so that you can tribute summon it again, or stacking your own deck with something like Dimension Shifter. Let's just hope it gets reprinted, because enough people realised that this card was good for it to shoot right up in price. On the subject of monarchs, a certain piece of support people thought might be good is actually, well, not. People read the Monarch Stormforth talking about tribute summons, and immediately think it might be worth it. But in pretty much every single situation, it's just a worse Unknown Winds. Just skip this one. On the subject of cards that people read one word of and think they'll be good, Chain Summon and Double Summon are actually pretty bad in this deck. The logic is that, if you get interrupted in your normal summon chains, you could then use this card to carry it on, but it just doesn't really work like that. If you get hand trapped on your Robina, you'll either need specifically Double Summon and Eaglin, or another low level bird plus your high level tribute monster. The odds of that are really not in your favour, and this card will be useless 90% of the time. So now let's finish off the bad support so that we can then look at some decent stuff, shall we? The last card that people would consider if they haven't tested it enough is Where Art Thou. It's easy to control a level 1 monster, so being able to search another is decent, right? Sure, except as soon as you summon a small bird, you're locked into a chain of normal summons that will usually last until you tribute them away, so by the time you can actually use this card, it's no longer useful. Okay, back to the good stuff, starting with Wing Requital. This card isn't actually out yet, but by the time the archetype is, this will be too, so it's worth considering. It allows you to draw 2 cards as long as you have 2 monsters on the field, and none of them aren't winged beasts. Obviously, draw cards are good. This one just has a small thing to consider. Similarly to Where Art Thou, it might be useless by the time you can actually use it. If you're sticking to pure winged beasts, then definitely use this card, but if you're using the next few cards, it's a little harder to pull off, so maybe avoid it in those versions. What could be worth passing up a pot of greed for though? Well, the Dogmatica engine, that's what. 3 Nadir Servant, 1 Ecclesia, and 1 or 2 Dogmatica Punishment work incredibly well in this deck. First of all, you never special summon from your extra deck anyway, so the downside of these cards just aren't a problem. Secondly, M-Pen allows you to normal summon anything, not just a winged beast, so after searching Ecclesia was Nadir, you can then normal summon her as part of your regular combo in order to get a punishment. And then you don't even sacrifice being able to summon a high level bird, since M-Pen can just search City of Dreams to repeat your combo all over again on your opponent's turn. These cards really give a direction to the deck that isn't just summon big bird, hope for the best, so we'll have to see if Nadir Servant survives the next ban list. As for one final piece of good support, we have Book of Moon. While it can of course interrupt your opponent's plays, it also has the added bonus of allowing your monsters to dodge Effect Veiler and Infinite Impermanence during your main combo. If they try and hand trap you, just flip your own monster down and carry on summoning, since you're then just going to tribute summon those monsters, it really doesn't matter that they're face down. Now you may have watched this far, expecting a certain card to be discussed and wondering where it was. Well, I still have a section left for cards that, sure, are fairly decent, but just aren't quite good enough to be considered over everything else in the good category. First up is a pair of cards, Darksimorg and Anti-Spell Fragrance. Darksimorg stops your opponents from setting cards, and Anti-Spell forces your opponent to set spells before they can use them. Together, these two cards lock your opponents out of both spells and traps. Problem is, Anti-Spell isn't searchable, so you might just end up as Darksimorg. And if you're playing against a trap-based deck like Eldritch, Darksimorg could fit well into the side deck, but otherwise it's usually just too situational. DD Crow is a hand trap that happens to be a winged beast, so it's searchable by Robina. Useful then? Well, sort of, but at the same time, you have the Ostrich, who can banish a card from your opponent's graveyard, but also recycles itself and continues your combo. There are just better hand trap choices, even if those other ones aren't searchable. Similarly, Lose One Turn seems tempting, since you likely won't be controlling any special summon monsters, allowing you to activate it, and if you do, it does slow your opponent down considerably, so it can be powerful. The problem is that it just doesn't do anything against established boards, so if you draw this going second, it'll be a dead card in your hand, which you can't really afford in this deck. And finally, these next two are probably the most defensible of these so-called mediocre cards. I'm talking about Barrier Statue of the Stormwind and Harpy's Feather Storm. Both shared a similar problem of not being very effective at all when going second, so that's some points against them. For Feather Storm, a likely scenario even when you do go first, is that you'll summon a Robina, get hand trapped, and then you'll have to end your turn with a water winged beast monster, rather than a wind one, making Featherstorm a useless card to set. Barrier Statue is a fairly decent lockdown card, but you can't protect it with anything like an Avomax due to not being able to special summon, and it competes with Ecclesia as your normal summon off of N-Pen. Plus Robina usually needs you to search Eaglin, so if you don't draw it, you won't really be able to incorporate it in your regular combo. If you really want to lock your opponents out of special summons, just use their counter trap, which can't be beaten over during the battle phase. So there you have it, tech options for Flundereeze, spanning all the way from good to terrible. Are you interested in building this deck? Do you think you'll use any of the options in this video? Tell me down in the comments, and while you're there, don't forget to give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. That's all for today.